Is Jason Tatum scoring a problem, or is he doing enough elsewhere to keep the Celtics afloat? All this and more on today's Celtics Chronicle. Yeah, I'm joined by Brendan Nunez, back from his trip over to SoCal, where he was visiting family, probably enjoying some sunshine. I mean, he's in Sacramento, it's always sunny. How you doing, Brendan?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good, man. Like you said, visited LA last weekend, LA area, I guess. Got some family down there and did my best to avoid every Laker fan that exists, but I'm doing all right, man. How about
That's
you?
impossible, though, right?
There's a lot. There's a lot. Luckily, none within my family. Well, I do have some that are from Cleveland and holding on to LeBron a little bit, maybe too much, but yes, it's a little tough to avoid it, but I find my ways.
Talking of tough to avoid, I've spent the last 24, 48 hours like going backwards and forwards on socials, just trying to defend Jason Tatum a little bit, right? So I'm clear. We might end up disagreeing here. We might end up pushing back, but I definitely want your take on it. So there's a narrative out there at the minute that Tatum needs to step it up as a scorer. His numbers are quite low during the postseason. I think he's shooting, what is it, like 25% from deep or something around that region, on 5.9 attempts per game since the postseason started. Shots just aren't falling for him right now, especially in this Cleveland series, driving the lane. He seems to be drawing fouls quite well, but he's not finishing with much assertiveness around the rim. His jump shot in the mid-range seems to be a little bit like shaky. All in all, his offensive output is not what you want from a guy that's about to sign a Supermax contract in the summer, a guy that was an MVP candidate throughout the regular season, and a guy that's meant to be your star player. And that's kind of where this narrative is forming. Like, is Tatum playing at a level that can win the Celtics a championship? So my pushback has been, well, he's improved as a screener. His screen assists are going up. His ability to operate as a screen and roll guy, screen and pop guy. His playmaking has been ridiculous. He's drawing a crowd on pretty much every touch on the wing, right? He's drawing two, drawing three, making the right reads. He's driving closeouts and then kicking the ball out once defense rotates. He's doing everything but scoring. But is that enough? Brendan, I'm waiting for you, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think this question's kind of existed for a little while, and I get where it's coming from. My first reaction is that they just won 4 games in a row in this postseason, and then they lose one, and it feels like everybody's tripping. And I get it. Sometimes in, that third quarter, start of the fourth, where Cleveland's kind of going on a run, and I get how it's like, okay, the best player needs to just get the ball and go to work. I don't think it's always that simple. Obviously, they have a lot of pressure on Tatum when it comes to Cleveland's defense standpoint. The Celtics are trying to get creative with the ways that they use him. If they're using him as a screener, trying to start him off ball and things like that, I think they can get a little bit caught with attacking mismatches, but I think that's also like what you want. I went back and looked at all of his shots again, and it's shot that for the most part, I think you're okay living with. And I didn't really feel like he was forcing things. There's some layups that he probably could have knocked down. I think you could have said that about a lot of guys. I kind of came away from this game like really more focused on, the shots weren't going down really for everybody on Boston, but that it was like kind of all the little things. I noticed that, when shots aren't going down, like Boston's 8-4 when they're shooting less than 30% on threes this year throughout the regular season, which is a lot worse or lower, like a bad winning percentage when you compare it to them being a ridiculous regular season team and only having lost, 16 games throughout the course of 18 games throughout the regular season.
Yeah, the game against Cleveland was their 20th loss of the season. Let's just put that into context, right? They were playing their 90th game, which means they're 70-20 throughout this basketball calendar year. 70-20, and we're tripping. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I agree. And like, I think that defensively was kind of weirdly where I was a little more focused, like whether that be giving Cleveland offensive rebounds and at the same time not creating any for yourself, any second chance opportunities. I think in the last episode you had me on, we talked about the possession game, right? And I think that when your offense, your shots aren't going down, that you got to lean a little bit more into that, because this is a team that they shot the most threes in the regular season. They knocked down more than 40%, 37 times. They lost one of those games. Like, there is an aspect of when shots go down, this is just going to look better. And to bring it back around to Tatum, this isn't a team in my mind where it's just Tatum's not the one shooting 23s a game. It goes to everybody, but it starts with Tatum and some of these other guys, but often Tatum. And I think he did an okay creating for others. I think sometimes the spacing was a little bit off, whether that be guys not getting to their spots quick enough or maybe just unideal cutting times and things like that. But for the most part, like, I left more so thinking that this team needed to be better at chasing 50-50 balls, at, winning the possession battle a little bit better, which I thought Tatum did a pretty good job getting to the free throw line, specifically in that first half. And I know it went away a little in that second half, but I get the moments again where it's like they can't get a bucket, Tatum go get one. And you wish that he could do that a little bit more at times. I also think this team is one that where those Derek White games are possible, like you saw in Miami, or all these other guys as well. Jason's getting a lot of crap. I think it could get passed down the line, really. And by the way, there's still no Kristaps Porzingis being dealt with here, but I didn't really have a problem with the way that he went about his process. I do think that he could have benefited from being a little bit more aggressive and embracing the physicality of the game a little bit more. But I kind of felt like those criticisms fit practically everybody on Boston's roster.
Yeah, I feel like he's just, I like to, the term Knicks for clicks. Have you heard that said before?
I don't know.
So Knicks fans use it all the time for when hot takes come out about the Knicks, right?
Gotcha.
I like Tatum for trending. Like, if you want to blow up on socials for a day or two, or you want to increase your views or really cause like a discussion, everybody loves to hate the Celtics, and everybody who follows the Celtics loves to kind of like really support them or really get on their back. Tatum for trending. And that's kind of how I feel here. Like, yeah, his shooting hasn't been great. I would prefer him to be more physically aggressive just because of the size of his shoulders, the way he can kind of bounce guys off him. He's been working on his body since he entered the NBA. He constantly jokes. I remember speaking to Grant Williams about this during the summer, like constantly jokes that he's the strongest dude on the roster. Grant's obviously the one who said he had a bird chest and he's only got strong legs. But regardless, like, Tatum should be able to finish around the rim in traffic. And sometimes I feel like, and I feel like this with Brown too, sometimes it feels that they're going to the layup as a cop-out for exploding at the rim and taking the additional contact to drive it home, right? There was a couple of layups that Tatum missed where I was like, you should have jammed that because you were right there. You finger rolled, all you had to do was turn your hand over and just flush it. There's other times where I'm like, yeah, he's embracing contact to create space, but he's not embracing contact around the rim to kind of finish through a guy's chest. Outside of that, sometimes he can settle for the free. Sometimes he can settle for a two, like going ISO, 2-3 dribbles, pull up. But on the whole, I'm quite comfortable with Tatum's offensive process, the same as you, especially when you factor in that he hasn't been, and I like to call this a featured scorer. He hasn't been a featured scorer this year. His role has been very much a get everybody else involved, use my gravity to draw two, draw three, make the right read, find the open man, let the ball swing, and then I'll cut, and then we'll go from there. Or we'll get me into the post off a slice action or a wedge screen or whatever we're going to run. There's going to be a mismatch because the post up occurred off a screening action. I'm going to cook that way. Nobody was hating on Tatum during the regular season where he did have some shooting struggles. He hasn't felt like a good perimeter shooter in a minute. And that's predominantly off pull-up jumpers. I did have the numbers. I'll pull them up when you have your say in a sec. But for the most part, his pull-up threes have been an issue since the NBA Finals. He's not shooting well when he's pulling up off the dribble. If he's shooting off the catch, he's shooting at a much higher clip. And that's generally the same for most people in the league, right? You shoot better off the catch than you do off the dribble. So why isn't Tatum relocating after getting the ball out of his hands to then get a catch and shoot opportunity? Why isn't that part of the game plan? Is that on him? Is that on Joe? Is that on everybody else not clearing out sides or setting actions for him to come off a flare screen on the weak side? Who knows? But as much as you can place blame on Tatum, there has to be some blame on the whole overall coaching of this team, where if you want Tatum to be more aggressive, that starts from the coaching bench. Those are instructions that get given out. We want you. We need you to be this guy tonight. We need you to do this. It also needs to be on the rest of his teammates to empower him to be that guy. Like, hey, you take it right now. So I think all the blame can be thrown to Tatum, but as you said, it can also get passed down the entire roster and the entire coaching staff.
Yeah, it's got to go to everyone. And I get why, head of the snake, that's the one you got to point to. But I mean, you guys remember there's a 45-point game from Tatum earlier in the year against Charlotte, highest scoring point game of the year, well, tied with Minnesota. And the Celtics lose that game. It's not as simple as like Tatum go get buckets. Everybody wants to look at SGA, a guy averaging 30. Like, look at the way their team is set up. They're 5 out, and that man drives to the paint so many times a game. That's not the way that Boston plays, and a lot of times if he's initiating the action and gets off of it, it's about, these 0.5 second decision being made by his teammates in order for the ball to come back around. Because if he creates an advantage, it's got to be maintained by these other guys. I can think of a possession or two where he swings it once and it kind of goes to where could be a hockey assist, and the momentum just dies for a sec, whether that's faking a pass or you pump fake or you drive, and then kind of the defense is able to reset. And there is some credit that is deserved to Cleveland here. Karis LeVert and Evan Mobley had a really good first half. I thought Mobley's rim protection was really good in this one. Okoro's a physical defender who has good size. Like Max Strus, I think that does an okay job fighting, even if he is a mismatch that should kind of be attacked. It felt like when Tatum got Garland on him was when he was the most successful, which obviously makes sense. But, you can get there's a free flowingness to modern offenses, to a lot of them, at least. I think some of them, again, I guess OKC is more in between, but obviously Dallas, Atlanta, even if you want to go back to Harden on some of his previous teams, where obviously everything's ran through these guys, but there's a free flowingness to a lot of these teams, including Boston, that I don't think you want to lose that throughout the course of the game. Where it's just like, we got to go at these mismatches. It can happen throughout the course of the action. And ideally, the ball gets back to the right players, So sure, again, moments where Tatum could have kind of gone on his own. But I think for the most part, too many of those really kills the offensive momentum for everybody else. And he still needs everybody else when it comes to this. I get the questions of, can Tatum be a top 3, top 5 guy? And there's times where he's already really close if he's not already there. But I get the concerns of, is he a true number 1? You might not need it, to be honest. You might be fine with 2 guys in the top 15 and 2 more in the next 15. Like, this is a very, very well-balanced team. And I don't think Tatum should get crap for that, because when it comes down to it, you want everybody to get involved. You never know where it's going to come from, and you don't want to be predictable. And if you're just force feeding Tatum, especially in a playoff series, part of this is that Cleveland got a more extended look at Boston after a really short in between, after they took out Orlando in game 7, and they got a little more acclimated coming into game 2, but you don't want to be predictable. And if it's just go feed Tatum, I get the best players are able to still get theirs in those moments. But if that's not your team, that's not your team.
And it's not your style of play either in terms of Tatum. He's worked hard at diversifying his game to not have to be that type of scorer, because when you're playing as a more complete game, you're reducing the risk of injury when driving to the lane. You're also giving everybody else opportunities to thrive. I just want to go back to these shooting numbers a quick second, but before I do, what we're talking about here, John Corrales and Locked On Celtics had a really good quote the other day that I wanted to kind of shout him out for. This isn't a head of the snake team. This is a Medusa team. This is what John said. He was like, you don't really have one head of the snake. If you chop one head off, there's still 3, 4, 5 other motherfucking snakes out there that are trying to destroy you. When you're on part of a team like that where everybody can cook, it doesn't make sense to play with that defined hierarchy. Now, the only time that I'd push back would be in the clutch. I think in the clutch, you do need a defined hierarchy. You need your go-to guy, you need your second option on go-to guy, and then you need your third option. Because if they shut down your first, you've got your second. They shut down your second, you can go back to the first, you can go to the third, and it's an iterative process, right? So I will say in the clutch, I'm cool with that. Outside of that, for the rest of the game, flow through everybody. Let Tatum be that guy that's distributing the ball. Let him be the guy that's letting the offense come to him. He's always been a player that works his way into a game. He's never really been a hot start guy. That's always been Brown's role. But the 3-point shooting is a problem. And I've got to admit that because it's bad at the moment. Looking at these numbers, he shot 43% on 2.2 catch and shoot attempts per game this season. So it's a low attempt considering they play a driving, kick heavy offense. It's just Tatum's usually one of the guys doing the driving and the kicking rather than the receiving. You can understand that because of the gravity. But he did take, on average, I'm putting it up, my apologies, 5.6 threes per game on pull-ups, shooting 34.9%. He was one of the worst on the team for pull-up 3-point shooting. Pritchard was below him, 1.4 attempts per game, shooting 30.6. Porzingis shot 0.3 attempts per game, so very low sample size, but shot 26.7%. So really, given how many attempts Tatum was taking, led the team in pull-up threes by a considerable margin. If we want to look at that, Jaylen Brown was second with 2.4. So Tatum was taking literally double. 2.4 times 2 is 5.6. So Tatum was taking literally double the amount of pull-up threes. And they were both very similar in terms of conversion rate. Drew Holiday shot 2.2, hit 39.3%. So overall, this team is great as a 3-point shooting machine, but they just don't really seem to be anyone there you want kind of beating guys off the dribble, stashing back, and then shooting in your grill. It needs to be ball movement. And that's where Tatum's going to come in handy. But because of the gravity, you can't ask him to be the guy receiving the pass because he's the one making that pass. He's your best playmaker. So I don't understand where the hate's coming from when he's the reason the offense works the way it does. If you take him out of the equation, defenses can load up on you easier. They can stay home on you easier. Tatum is the guy, along with Porzingis when he's on the floor, that is really stretching that defense out and forcing those unwanted rotations. He's creating trigger points on that defense quite quickly. It's difficult, man. I don't understand how you can hate on him for playing a role that literally is what's making this team tick.
And I think what can get lost is another aspect that makes life easier for your teammates is that Tatum's getting the best defender on the opposing team every single night. Like, I know that seems obvious, but that really makes it a lot easier when Jaylen Brown has a significantly easier matchup than the other possible option, you know? And again, this is something typical number ones have to deal with. And I agree with you with the clutch stuff. And that's really where my concern is kind of lied with the Celtics all year long. And partially because we didn't get to see it that much. They didn't get to work through the potential growing pains that could be there. But I understand the concerns with Tatum. This just feels like a weird moment to talk about it. It is really where I was mainly coming from.
70 and 20.
Yes. Like they also, I know people hate the, like, sometimes shots just don't fall, but it's really true. And there are still ways you could have won this game. Again, 50-50 balls, the possession game. I thought the offensive rebounds was a big difference between these teams. And Celtics looked like they just at a point thought they were going to cruise through it kind of after they got up. It didn't feel like they had playoff level intensity for 45 plus minutes like they should have. It just didn't feel like a moment where I didn't really catch myself during the game that often being like, man, Tatum's got to really get going right now. Like for me, it's like the Celtics have to get going, and I know that Tatum is a big part of that. And I'm kind of oversimplifying it here, but I get the long-term concerns. I just didn't really come away from this game thinking, wow, Tatum's really, really got to be better, and maybe it's because Donovan Mitchell went off and people have a tendency to be like, oh, look what their star did. Look what our star did, but again, I get the long-term stuff. I do worry about if you get Denver in the finals, Minnesota in the finals, even New York could put up a fight, right? You get in these close games. What's that going to look like? There is also stuff in the past where we have seen Tatum have really big moments, clutch moments. I can think back to early in his career, a nasty step back against the Clippers on Paul George, where he practically dropped him to win the game.
Steps on his foot just before anyone comes at us in the comments.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. This man dunked on Braun in his rookie year in Game 7. I do think Tatum doesn't seem to have fear. I think there are questions about the execution late, and I get that. I don't think that we're at the point where we need to be, and I guess just kind of being Celtics fans in general, just have to, it just felt like weird timing to me. It felt like weird timing to me because I didn't feel like, I know they put up 94 points, but I really felt like it was all the little details and defensively that kind of killed them in this one.
They
And
came out flat,
Tatum's
right?
part of that. But yeah,
I mean, if you look at it from this angle as well, the Nuggets are the defending champions. They had 2 stinkers against Minnesota. No one was giving them the same amount of bullshit that the Celtics have dealt with. Edwards had a really bad game in Minnesota's loss on Friday. No one's really on his back. They're like, oh, he showed accountability. He said he didn't have it. Tatum's done that a bunch of times. So where are we? Tatum has a bad game and it's a problem. And I understand that the expectations are different. I do, because Minnesota didn't expect to be this good this quick. And the Celtics are expected to be a juggernaut. So I completely understand. I don't think Tatum did himself any favors with his comments after the game. Like, people think we're a super team, but we don't have an MVP. We don't have a coach of the year. Yeah, you didn't really do yourself any favors there. I understand. What I don't understand is why all of a sudden everybody wants him to be a version of himself that they didn't want him to be when he was that version of himself. They didn't want the isolation heavy JT that was playing Kobe brand of basketball. When that was happening, they wanted this version. And now we've got this version. Everyone wants that version. I don't understand how you can do both. Now, should he be able to flip that and be more dominant at stretches? Yes.
He's also 26, and this is a learning process. We've seen him do both. We haven't seen him do both together, but we know that he can do both.
And that's the learning curve, right? Now, The problem is the window for a championship is right now. If this team, this core wants to win, they've got this year and next year. After that, the money starts to get really tight. Changes will probably need to be made. Is Joe Mazzulla the right head coach for the job? I think that when you have such a dominant season and he gets buy-in from so many stars, that the answer should probably be yes. Because if he wasn't the right coach for the job, the guys wouldn't have bought in and sacrificed the way they have to get the type of offense and defense that they've got right now. So he's obviously got everyone on board. That means he's got good interpersonal skills. They respect him, they trust him, and so forth. I'm not hating on Tatum. I understand some people are, but I think that this is the version everyone wanted of him. Now that it's here, I understand the needing for him to be the old version of himself from time to time. There should be no reason for your starters getting pulled with 5 minutes left in the second game of the Eastern Conference semifinals. That is a complete aberration from the entire playing staff. They should never have put themselves in that position. But that's on everyone. That's not just on Tatum. So, no, I don't think Tatum deserves the amount of shit he's got this past 3-4 days. Maybe I'm being a bit biased here, but I just think that it's very easy to kick someone when they're down. And his body of work and the fact that he's playing in a way that everybody wanted up until it's here, I feel like, no, this is exactly the style of play that he needs to take himself to that next level.
Yeah, I understand that, like, he's on a ridiculous trajectory, or has been for years, I guess, but that doesn't mean that this guy doesn't have flaws and there isn't going to be these learning processes. To relate it to, like, the Kings this year, De'Aaron Fox shot the most threes he shot in his career by a large margin. And at some point it transitioned from, oh, it's great he's shooting threes, they're going down. And at one point it turns into, God, he really should get to the paint more. He's just settling, And I would imagine that next year he's going to learn the proper shot balance. It's part of that learning process. When Porzingis comes in this year, there's so much focus on Tatum in, whether it be pick and roll or whatever sort of action you want to talk about, that he's creating mismatches for other people. They don't want to switch on to Tatum. So while they're recovering back to Porzingis, he's able to make that read. And he's gotten a lot better at making the simple passes, right? It's something that I think Ant still needs to get better at, for example, and it'll be part of his learning process too. But I think that he's gotten so much better at that aspects. It's just a balance. And I get, like you said, that Celtics are in a spot where I guess they can't wait, but I'd almost argue that it's okay for Tatum to still be learning a little bit. Some of these other guys are still around to pick up the slack. As Tatum continues, he's still going to get better. I know the memes, he's only 21 or whatever. He's 26. He's going to still get a little bit better. Or
in my opinion, it's
possibly a lot better.
Yeah, it's 2 years away from his prime. I think prime starts at like 28.
And that, I feel like I get why that can't be leaned into because of the expectations, but it's a reality of this. And I think that that's partially why there is a responsibility on some of these other guys. And you can still win with a flawed number one.
You
I
can.
think. Like, it
When
depends what
you're
level of flaws we're
second,
talking
third,
about. And
fourth,
yeah,
I think that the depth here was always to help cover for when Tatum has a bad game, Brown has a bad game. That's why there's so much depth. And I've seen people saying, "Oh, well, really, if you look at the roster as it is currently without Porzingis, the only change this year is that we swapped Marcus Smart for Drew Holiday, and Drew Holiday's worse." The Celtics were very aware that Drew Holiday's production falls off in the playoffs, but they didn't acquire him to be an offensive guy. They acquired him because he's one of the best defensive guards in the NBA, and he's really, really good at guiding an offense. He makes the right read. He's a stronger defender in terms of he's not really a stronger defender than Smart, but I think he's a similar level, but he gives you more in playmaking, and he does give you a little bit more in scoring gravity. If you put Drew in the corner this year, he was one of the best corner 3-point shooters in the regular season. Teams aren't going to care that he's not shooting well right now. They can't disrespect him by helping off the corner that he's filling. You couldn't really say that with Smart because teams dared Smart to shoot. And then I just want to touch on the mismatch hunting you were speaking about earlier as well. I know a lot of people are like, the Celtics are hunting too many mismatches. They're doing it in the flow of the offense, but as Celtics fans, when we've seen last season, especially with Sam Hauser kind of emerging in the rotation, and teams were taking themselves out of their offense to hunt Hauser in a mismatch, and it was bogging them down, slowing them down. That's not what's happening right now. But if you want Tatum to be this number one hierarchy, that's exactly what is going to happen. So it's just a caution. I'm happy with the way things are running right now. Whether or not I'm going to sound the same at the end of this series, we're going to have to wait and see. Things can change. But overall, I agree with you, man. I think that, there's maybe a little bit too much expectation on one guy rather than over an entire rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it can kind of go to everybody. And again, I get why it goes to the top guy, but I really think it is that. And Cleveland is a really good defensive team. They're kind of middle of the pack offensively. I think that they also did a good job, like looking like they were closing out a little bit short, but then actually finishing the closeout at the end and making some of those guys think. Like, Tatum could have easily made 2-3 more of those shots.
Yeah.
And then he's at a 30 ball on 10 of 17. And I don't think we're hearing any of this, and it's just kind of wild to me.
It's the reactionary nature of fan, right? Fan stands for fanatic. And I'm not going to make
he deserves defensive crap for his defense, just like everybody, like Cleveland was doing a really good job digging in. They're really helping. It's really off-ball defense where I saw a lot of it. Also, like kind of some of the on-ball pressure. Yes, for sure. Okoro is strong as hell when he's digging in there.
Yeah.
And some Celtics guys were kind of standing around a little bit casually. And Tatum absolutely was that as well. I kind of thought that was his biggest shortcoming. And that's the whole team.
And with that, we're going to leave you because there's going to be a game in a few hours. You might be watching this after game 3. If you are, then remember this was after game 2, so don't come for us. If you're not subscribed to the Celtics Chronicle, go and sign up to the newsletter. Link will be in the description. If you're not following Brendan on social media, then you're missing out because Brendan's dope as fuck. If you're not following me on social media, hit me up on Instagram because Twitter doesn't like me very much.
Dope as fuck.
Yeah. Everybody catch y'all later. Peace.